Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. In this episode, I chat with two incredible women, Yaya Han and Jinx Cosplay. I am in awe of their skills in sewing and crafting, but even more impressed with their compassion and advocacy. Yaya and Jinx were generous to share their stories of experiences with discrimination and racism. We discussed the issues surrounding anti-Asian hate crimes and how including AAPI history in our education system can be a solution. I am so grateful to both Yaya and Jinx for speaking out for the Asian American community. We urge you to sign the petition to include AAPI history in our schools and call your legislators to vote for HR 2283, which is a nationwide bill that will help include AAPI history in our education system. Knowledge is power. Yaya is a costume designer, cosplay entertainer, and author since 1999 and has never looked back. Over the years, Yaya has built a successful business in the cosplay community, creating a popular cosplay accessories line that is available online and at conventions, as well as her line of Yaya Han brand merchandising. Jinx has always had a love for cosplay and enjoys being part of the cosplay community. As an avid gamer, she also incorporates her love for video games with her cosplay fashion. It was really fun to sit down and talk to these talented and hardworking women who are not only successful, but passionate about what they do. I'm grateful for these conversations, and I love that it's allowed me to meet so many wonderful humans, many of which have become close friends. My favor, as usual, is to please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/sifumimichan. For comments or suggestions, email me at sifumimichan@gmail.com or reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Yaya and Jinx. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Hi so much. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
I mean, I was overwhelmed that I didn't have just one, but two amazing cosplayers. And I'm super, super psyched about it because I love cosplay. Now, I don't have any expertise in cosplay at all, but I have a little backstory I wanted to share. It's my first convention I've ever been invited to. I was a panelist for to discuss my Mulan experience, and it was at MomoCon. And so that is where
in Atlanta, where I live,
where I met Yaya Han. And I, very newbie to everything, didn't even know anything about conventions. And my friend was like, it's Yaya Han. I have to get a photo with her. I met her at the Boston Con, and she's telling me all about you. And I even bought some ears from you.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so I was like, fast forward, and here we are, and I'm sitting with the lovely Yaya Han. So this is very exciting for me.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you, and I appreciate that Jinx sort of brought us together. And,
absolutely,
and we're just very excited to chat and.
Yes, 100%. And it was interesting because like I said, it was the first con I'd ever been to. And then since then I've been at several more, and I didn't realize MomoCon was so special because there were so many cosplayers. Like when I was there, people were telling me like, you don't understand. Most people don't cosplay, not like the whole population. Whereas at MomoCon, I felt like very out of place because I didn't have a cool costume.
Oh,
and
wow.
So, yeah. And it was, and I loved the community, and I've really learned that that's what cosplay is a community. And, it's of course something we're going to talk about now. And I was curious, like how that's been for you, like being a part of that community and also like leaders in that community and just being so highly influential. I mean, Yaya, you have your own fabric in Joann's, and
yes,
you have definitely come a long way from the beginning in your origins. I loved reading about your story. Maybe you could kind of share a little bit about that.
Well, I fell into the convention world like most other people, just, as a fan. I just was lucky to discover it a really long time ago. 1999 was my first convention, and it was Anime Expo, which at that point was the biggest anime convention in the United States, although it only had 6,000 attendees.
Wow.
So, but for us, it was like gigantic. Yeah, it was like immediately that feeling of, wow, these are my people. I belong here. And I loved cosplay for the fact that you could really express yourself as a fan in such a unique and such a passionate way, you know? And so I've just been very active since then, and I've grown up in this world, and, you know, I've been to conventions ever since. And it's truly a part of my life. So that's how I also got to meet so many different people from different parts of the world. And Jinx and I, we met, you know, towards the beginning of like my cosplaying. Did we meet like 2001 or something?
2008. I started in 2001. But yeah, Yaya was one of my inspirations. But we did meet in 2008, and we did a group together.
That was that the Witchblade group, or what did we do? Yeah,
Witchblade. Yep.
So like it's kind of like, you know, we met in San Diego, but then we got to meet again at a convention in Dubai several years later, and, you know, and now we're both back in the States. But it's really cool for sort of like the globalness of cosplay, you know, that it happens all over the world, and that you can sort of like find, you know, a part of this a place within this world,
right?
No matter where you are. I really love that.
I think it's amazing. And so you and Jinx met through cosplay, obviously. And Jinx, I read that you are really into like gamer cosplay. And so, and you just mentioned now that Yaya was one of your inspirations. Maybe you could kind of share a little bit about that, because it's great that you get to meet one of your inspirations and then also kind of interact and be able to be a part of something.
Yes, absolutely. I started in 2001, and my first introduction to cosplay was within my family of friends. I went to San Diego Comic-Con 1996, yes, very long ago. And then, of course, the only resources we had online was cosplay.com, you know, and of course, that's where I saw a lot of Yaya's stuff, and she very inspirational still to this day, she inspires me. And then we met in 2008, which was so much fun. And then I actually moved to Dubai and reached out to her, hey, you're coming to Dubai. So we met up. You came again to Abu Dhabi, and then we met up as well at Ferrari World. That was a lot of fun.
And it was.
Yeah. And while I was even overseas, you know, I went to a lot of Dubai and Middle East conventions. I met Kalsara and Elfie from Europe. I went to the UK. So I actually managed to connect with a lot of cosplayers all over the world. And that was cool. You know, thanks to my job, my real world job. Then of course, now I'm back, and seeing how much it's grown since I'm back, it kind of blew my mind. So I'm super excited to be a part of it. And it's become more and more part of my life these days. I'd say it's probably one of the most important things in my life now.
Yeah. And I love that you just kind of weaved both of you, this web of how international it is, because we're literally living in a world where we're all facing this crazy pandemic together, right? But we're also in a world where there's just so many conflicts across state lines, across country lines. But there's something so positive like cosplay where we can kind of like take this angle. We have something in common. I always, and my listeners now are going, here she goes. She's going to talk about food, because I really feel food is the other thing that really brings us all together, because who doesn't love food?
Right. You're right. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. World peace and food is somehow going to come into play if it ever happens. But in your community, I just think it's so great. Like you just listed off all these different countries and things, and how international and diverse. And it doesn't really matter where you're from, because as a cosplayer, you're someone different anyway. And it doesn't matter what country you're from or what language you speak and how international that is. And perhaps you could both kind of speak to what that's like to go to these different countries. And do you feel like, you know, where you're at the Olympics and you're like, I'm representing the USA or I'm representing this country? Or do you just feel like it's everybody is just kind of in their character? And, you know, what is that international experience like?
I think it just shows how that cosplay is the best icebreaker, you know, like you're right. You don't have to speak the same language. I've been to conventions in, you know, countries where I really Brazil. Like I don't speak a word of Portuguese, but it's like you meet people in costume and you'll make it work somehow. You'll like gesture and you'll like somehow communicate with each other. And especially if you're dressed as, some characters from the same show, then it's like you're family already. And so that has always really struck me. And I'm also like, since now I'm very involved in creating crafting products and cosplay materials. When I go and travel, I always ask people like, where do you buy like fabric here? How do you get your materials? What do you have available? And then like once you start talking the creative aspect and sort of the crafting aspect, that's another aspect that brings you together. I think like not only sharing the fandoms, but also the crafting process. And, just like I love I love having cosplayers, like local cosplayers take me material shopping. I'm like, take me to where your crafting products are, or take me to like where your anime stores are. I want to see. And you just kind of like you see like what is popular in that country, what people are really into, and that depends a lot on like what shows are being shown. Before the ages of streaming, it was like very dependent on what kind of programs were on TV, and so like in Mexico and such, they really love like Saint Seiya. And me in the United States and in Europe, people never understood what Saint Seiya was. And that was like one of the first anime and manga that I got into when I was a child in China. And so I know that anytime I go to Mexico, I can talk to people about Saint Seiya and I can bring my Saint Seiya cosplay and, people will get it. So I really like that international aspect of it.
Yeah. And Jinx, obviously you traveled the world. And so also something universal is the gaming. Right? Because that's also worldwide. Everyone's playing all these different games. How do you find that connectivity? Because there's crafting, there's the cosplay, and then I know from the gaming aspect and representing those characters, have you found that to be very icebreaker and universal as well?
Absolutely. When I actually lived in Dubai for 6 years and I stopped cosplaying because I didn't really know what to expect. And they had their first Middle East film in Comic-Con. I think it was in 2012. And I went not in costume, but I was so shocked. I was like, oh my God, there's cosplayers here. So I actually managed to find one other cosplayer that's now a lifelong friend. She's actually from Australia and she helped me find fabric because I used to go to the quilting store in the mall. But there's this little street out behind, where all the big buildings are, and they get all their fabric from Asia and everything. And it's wonderful. But I was so I was so pleasantly stunned because Dubai is made up of like 80% expats. So people from all over the world. And I was so shocked. I'm like, Phoenix, right? Like that's popular. Bob's Burgers. You guys watch, it's like, it's so cool to see what fandoms get out there because, and then of course there's people that are like, I have no idea what you are.
Right.
But video games, as you said, travel a lot more than, anime and other shows do. Because, of course, they sell these in all the countries. They're just in different languages. So that's one thing I do see a lot more common is video games, especially like Blizzard games. World of Warcraft and Diablo is huge, like all over the world. And it's just easier, isn't it? Because you can get online and even like you can play on different servers, connect with people from all over the world. I hear a lot of gamers say, oh, I play with this guy from the UK, or, oh, I play with this person in Korea. And I think that's kind of a great way for people to start interacting with people from different countries.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of multiple countries and diversity, Yaya, I was so impressed to see that you speak not only Chinese, but also German. And I would just love to hear more about your background and that diversity, because I'm so jealous because I speak maybe like my Chinese combined, half Cantonese, half Mandarin might equal to another one, but I don't consider myself bilingual. It's just not very good. So I love that diversity.
I grew up in Germany. I think that's something a lot of people are surprised to find out about me. Like I was born in China, but I moved to Germany as a child, and because my parents divorced and my mom remarried in Germany. And so I spent my formidable like personality building teenage years in Germany. So I feel like I actually am more German than Chinese. Like I sometimes have like that identity crisis, not really quite understanding where I'm from. And, but I know that like a lot of people, when they meet me, they expect me to act more Chinese. And no, I'm German. I'm very punctual. I'm very blunt. I'm very, to the point. And so it's very, it's just very funny. But yeah, like Germany is very, like, I do see it as my home. But of course, growing up there, I didn't really quite belong there, which is partially why I decided to stay in America when I had the chance to come over here, because Germany also does not have very much, Asian representation. And I was like one of 2 Asian students in our school. And I was always very different. I was like, just always like the weird girl that drew, these like Barbie looking characters. They were manga characters. So it's like, it is a little bit bittersweet to think back on my childhood and think that, I'm glad I left China and, experienced this broader world, but also I couldn't really find who I was in Germany. I didn't feel like I belonged there. And so coming to America, I only felt like I belonged when I discovered cosplay. So it was like, cosplay is like, that's my world. That's my,
which
tribe.
is kind of wonderful because you don't have to live somewhere for that and identify with, well, I'm from this country, you can be who you want to be. And thank you for sharing that, by the way, because I feel like even though it was in Germany, here in the US, I had similar feelings of just being kind of the minority and not fitting in and maybe wanting to assimilate or fit in. And I think so many people see where you're at now and they think, well, there's no way you ever felt displaced because you're so confident, you're successful and you're where you're at. And right. And it's so refreshing, I think, and wonderful that you could be that honest to share because many of us have felt that way, have felt like displaced and that we just didn't belong. And I'm sure, Jinx, where did you grow up? Because now I know you've traveled the world, but please share your background.
Yeah, I was born in the Philippines, but I moved to Arizona when I was really young. So I pretty much lived either here or Dubai. But it's so funny that, you say that you were the weird little girl that drew like anime characters. And so was I. Like I drew a lot of like manga characters, anime characters. And I remember I went to school in the west side of Phoenix. If nobody knows what that's like, it's pretty rough. My dad was in the Air Force, so it was closer to the base. But it was primarily Hispanic community. So when I was in school, I was one of probably like a handful of, Asian students as well. And I remember this one time that I submitted some drawings. I was like in 4th grade, submitted some drawings to be put for like Artist of the Month. And they put it up and I was just like, it's so funny because I would draw pretty accurately. I drew Orchid from Killer Instinct. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this game, but she had these really like square boobs. So I drew her because she's cool. And there it was on the wall. And I was like, wow. But my teacher must have loved it, but I could tell that this was different than what everyone else was drawing and seeing. So it was tough. It was a really weird place to be in.
Yeah. And, that kind of plays into, I love how diverse and multicultural we are, like literally covering the globe here. Because even though I have a Chinese background, I was born in Boston. I grew up in Orlando, but my mom doesn't speak any Chinese because she was born and raised in Jamaica. And most of my family is actually Jamaican because they, we speak Jamaican together. So I speak a little more patois than I would even say Chinese, but like, it's interesting because if anybody were to just take a screenshot of us, right, there's assumptions immediately made, right? There's assumptions immediately made. Like, you said, everyone's like, what do you mean you speak German? Don't you speak Chinese, right? And so it's just so interesting how the world is becoming this melting pot, and it's not even just America anymore that's the melting pot, and how easy it is to make assumptions about who we are based on how we look. And we were talking off air, and one of the things that I've been fighting for is for people who look like us to have better for other people to have better understanding of who we are. And for me, one of the best ways is through education. And I'm just grateful for both of you, because one of the reasons that I invited you to on the show was not just to talk about all the amazing cosplay, but I had told you about my initiative to bring in Asian American and Pacific Islander history to our youth. And you were both so enthusiastic and on board with the fact that, you know, we feel that the youth now should be learning about the immigrant experience and understanding that why Asians are here, and the fact that the ones that you're seeing here are in fact American, right? Because being seen as constantly the perpetual foreigner, or that we don't belong, or we shouldn't be here, or we're supposed to fit into this box that they, you know, kind of imagine us to be. And so I'm really grateful that you were both so willing to come on and kind of discuss that based on all the different experiences you've had, regardless of what country or where you're from or what's happening. It's like, these are things that are affecting our kids now, right? The kids that live here, that they are American, they grew up here, and, you know, they're being called out or being picked on, or as you've seen in the news, there's a lot of anti-Asian hate crimes that's been happening. And I really believe that's due to a lack of education. And I think that education is empowerment and knowledge is empowerment. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about, you know, what you think in terms of why it's an important initiative. You know, having Asian American history included, because it's not just Florida. So I have an initiative going on here, Make Us Visible Florida, but there is also now a national campaign for Make Us Visible USA, that there is a national bill that's trying to be passed. And, you know, I'm really excited about that. So I'd love your input and your thoughts on it. And, you know, just appreciate you sharing.
I actually have a funny little story about how we look like the foreigners, because I was born a U.S. citizen because my grandfather was in World War II in the Philippines. But my husband is British, so he's English, born and raised. I brought him over to Vegas for the first time, and we were at a show, and I was brought on stage, of course, and they made some funny joke about, oh, she's here for the green card. And I'm like, actually, he is. So, you know, I mean, obviously, it's
like,
all good fun.
Yeah.
Little did you know. So that's actually a pretty funny story. He's actually gotten his citizenship now, which is exciting. But yeah, between the two of us, they never expect me to be the American.
Right. Exactly.
I think it's so weird. It is so weird how we are judged by our looks. Like, I have a Vegas story too. Before I continue and talk about the initiative, we actually, my husband Brian and I, we lived in Vegas for a couple of years, like in 2006, 7, 8, something like that. And he is white. He's white, American, Southern boy. And we were driving at night to like try to get something to eat. And we ended up in like on the wrong street, and it ended up being sort of like a dark industrial area. And, you know, he's driving, I'm in the passenger seat. And all of a sudden we have like a police car following us. And they kind of keep following us down the street into a cul-de-sac kind of thing, and like pull us over. And like then it's like 2 white cops, one on each side, come up, and they both were just like, all right, driver's license, ID. And they both were like, do you know him? And they're like, do you know her? And I'm like, yes, that's my boyfriend. You know, what do you want me to do? Like list off all his stats and whatever. But they thought I was a prostitute basically, because I was Asian and
exotic. You were exotic, quote unquote, right? Which is
exactly. Yeah. So they had to make sure that we were actually together or something. But it is definitely very. I think like it's so crazy to, you know, look at somebody and already have made a judgment about them. And I think especially for Asian people, we are used to being sort of the minority that assimilates really well, and that just, you know, kind of like we don't have it as hard as, you know, African, like Black people in this country. So really, like, we shouldn't complain and we shouldn't speak out. And it truly wasn't until this pandemic that I realized how little that I have spoken out for my own ethnicity. You know, like I've been supporting the Black initiatives, and especially in cosplay, really speaking out for Black cosplayers. And I even wrote about racism and blackface in my book. And, I was like, I wasn't really saying anything about like my own race and how we are discriminated. And so I'm really, really glad that you are doing this initiative, because I agree that a lot of this is a result of lack of education and ignorance, and just sort of like this ingrained ignorance in this culture. And even I see it in my own husband, like I remember what it was like when I started dating him, and I've had to educate him throughout the years and really like make him see things from my point of view, like make him stop, like joking about certain things that he just never knew that they were offensive in any way. And he thought that because he was dating me, it'd be okay to joke about them.
Right.
And
that sounds so familiar.
Right? Isn't it weird? It's like, why are we dating these white men? I just don't get it. And
you are educating them. Thank you.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I see how difficult it is to educate him. And I was like, how have you never known this? How have you, how do you not understand how to make me feel better when, like this person came to, and shot up these spas here, like in my city. And I am now terrified to go outside, and I'm incredibly upset. And his reaction was like, it probably isn't so bad. It'll be all right. Like he was trying to soothe me and trying to like make me feel better. Yeah. But he was saying all the wrong things. He was saying things like, oh, I'm sure it was not race related. I'm sure he was just a crazy person. Or, I only hear, we like everybody that we know supports this. So you should be fine. You should not be afraid. Like he was saying things like that. And I was like, you're now just making me feel like a crazy person, because I am afraid, I can't help but be afraid. And by you saying stuff like that, it just like discounted my fear instead of acknowledging it. And so things like that, I think, are incredibly important to educate people on, not just like where we as Asian Americans came from, but also how to be an ally and how to support us and how to like, understand us and where we're coming from.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, because I think it's very, very, it's very common for people to say, well, I thought that this was just funny, or I'm just joking. I'm not racist. And we're not saying that you're necessarily racist, but they don't understand that perpetuates the problem, that you continually saying things that are offensive. And here's the point. It doesn't matter if someone else didn't find it offensive, because if you find it offensive, then that's what matters. If you're feeling afraid, then that's what matters. If you have those fears, then they are real and they are certainly warranted, especially being that, like you said, this is your city and you got, up there, that's where the biggest tragedy is that the massacre happened. And it is very scary, and it's still scary to this day. I mean, they said, oh, he was on his way to Florida, right? And so I'm going, oh my gosh, he's on his way to Florida. So, I mean, we're all afraid. And I think it makes complete sense to be in fear, but at the same time, speaking out, having these conversations, correcting people, those are all part of education. It's not all formal education. Like this is absolutely, part of that is having conversations with Asians, right? Is part of learning, and I'm sure, Jinx, you've had experiences as well. Like you even just shared, like getting up on stage and having these like slights at you, but you grew up in Phoenix, you said. I'm sure you have several, thoughts on this as well.
Absolutely. And Phoenix is, where the closer you get to the coast, as we can all agree, the more diverse, the cities get, right? So even in Phoenix, though, in a minority community, which was a Hispanic community, I still suffered as another minority within the minorities. And it's funny that when we talk about, oh, they used to say this and that, there's things that I've started to remember throughout the years that I blocked out because at the time they hurt me. And now I'm like, wow, that was so racist, but these were kids, it was acceptable at the time, which because it was acceptable at the time doesn't mean it's always been acceptable. It just means that we flew under the radar. We tried to be either blend in or we were just so different that we were the weird ones. And I can pick out these kids in my head from when I went to school, who was a weird one, who tried to be cool. There was no just Asian person. We weren't just like, hey, that's Jessica, she's Asian. It's like, no, she's in the marching band and she does theater. Like we really tried to just assimilate as much as you could. And that's true. I didn't really have this empowerment to be an individual. My parents were born and raised Filipino, and they raised me how they knew to raise a child. So I was kind of torn. I'm technically not even a first generation because I wasn't born here, but I was still torn between really traditional Filipino upbringing and then, of course, having all my friends in an American upbringing. So I found myself, between two worlds all the time. And it took a long time for me through my 20s to accept my differences, to accept how I looked at things differently. And it's weird because it was only recently I remembered, these kids used to call my phone and they would mimic my dad's voice on the voicemail. But these were my friends. They just thought it was funny. But I'm like, wow, that was awful. And it's the same thing that you say about your husband. I do the same thing with my husband. I actually went back to, and this is like recently, the last like 5-10 years, I went back to his hometown. He lives in a small town just south of England. There's like barely any Asian people there. I know that when I walk around, people are like, where did she come from? And that goes the same for his whole family, and it's just the way that they're raised. I mean, his dad still has some really old fashioned ideas that I've worked really hard to, change. And some of his family members still kind of make some jokes here and there. And I got to be like, hey, that's not cool anymore. And I'm so lucky that they're receptive.
Yeah.
It could be a lot worse. They could just be set in their ways and, that's it. But I think as long as people are receptive to learning what is, offensive and not offensive, or, what used to be and now, is, I think it will really help in the long run.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you, Jinx, because it's not always easy to confront the in-laws and go, hey, it can be uncomfortable. And like you said, it doesn't have to be an argument, or it doesn't have to be like mean or shouting, and just saying, hey, you know what, that's actually not okay. And here's what we say now. And this is why, we don't use the word oriental, because I get it. Generationally, that wasn't a slur, right? And so generationally, it is our job to try to educate and not be upset at every little thing as well, but also to just be understanding as long as they're willing and open. So, that's absolutely a really, really great point that you just shared. So, and I just feel like, looking forward, we're finally at a point now where we see this next generation doing a little better than we did, right? And that's the point. Each generation to learn from our mistakes, because I have the same experiences as you did. I look back now and I think, oh man, a lot of people said all these things to me that people are saying now, oh man, this would be horrible. Don't say these things, right? But you just take it and you think, well, don't make the waves, or it's fine. They're just kidding, right? And so now we learn that we need to correct it, and it's not okay. And I think another misconception is because we're not, in a way, we're traumatized, but we're not traumatized and crying all the time. And we're strong women who have our careers, and we put one foot in front of another, that you're not this damaged person, that you didn't experience racism or you weren't hurt by it. Right. And that's a misconception as well, to see you who you are now and think that just because you didn't necessarily cry when you were younger, doesn't mean it didn't hurt, or doesn't mean it didn't affect you later in life, looking back, kind of like what you just mentioned, Jinx. So I think those are all really good points that you all just made. And in terms of the education now that we're fighting for, I mean, there's been some success in Chicago and Illinois, and there's been success in Connecticut and Denver and California, but that's not even half, right? That's we're looking at a huge fight in Georgia. It's going to be very, very, very difficult to get that law passed. Florida is the same. It's very, very kind of 50-50. We just don't really know which way it's going to go. And we're really hoping that the national bill goes across, well, in the same way the COVID-19 Act did, which is to, trace anti-Asian hate crimes as well as other ethnic crimes. And that this isn't just also for Asian Americans. To learn about Asian American history helps all ethnicities, right? So we're all here elevating one another, and we're breaking, ground and making way, paving the way for all the other education to come through. So I get very frustrated about that model minority myth where they try to pit us against one another. I'm like, no, we stand with our Black Americans and our African American, brothers and sisters. We stand with our Muslim Americans. We stand together. And that's exactly what a lot of, and I'll just say it, white supremacists do, is they try to separate us so that we don't unite. And I think in solidarity is where, we have our strength. So thank you both for, supporting both of the bills, the national one, as well as like the statewide ones, because, your stories, you sharing those make impressions, because people maybe don't believe that racism exists and they don't believe that this happens. And until you hear, they can learn empathy. So thank you both for sharing.
Absolutely.
Well, how can people help with the bills passing? Because you said that there's a fight in Georgia, I live in Georgia.
Yep.
And I just, what can we do, or what can the audience do to support this bill?
Thank you for asking, Yaya. So one is there is a petition on change.org, and I will list that here, change.org/Asian American History. That's the one for Florida. You don't have to live in Florida to support it, though. Like the more people we get, the more it shows each state leading the way. It helps. And then the national bill is HR 2283. I will list a lot of stuff here as well. And if you would both be kind enough to share these things, basically, you need to call your legislators. You need to call them and say, hey, we want this to pass. We believe in including AAPI history into our education for our youth, and we want you to vote for it. So I've heard that if a legislator hears 7 or 8 times, they start to pay attention. So 7 or 8 people is not a lot of people to just go, oh, let me see what's going on. So over in Arizona, it's important. So anybody anywhere needs to vote on these. And that's what it's about. Like elected officials will listen to the constituents, because then they know they won't get reelected. And honestly, they need to remember they work for us. Elected officials work for us. We are the people, and we are the ones that are asking. And so, yes, definitely, if you could both, post and kind of ask people to, call their legislation, send the emails. It only takes like 10 seconds of your day to do. But also, if you could sign the petition, that would be awesome, because again, that shows strength in numbers, and it shows that, the community is standing together and that this is something the community wants. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. Actually, here in Phoenix, one of our cities, Mesa, has just started an Asian district, because, of course, we know in California, there's Little Tokyo, there's Chinatown. We don't really have that here in, Metro Phoenix. So Mesa actually has been dedicating a whole 2 miles of street. And they're naming it the Asian District, which is really cool and exciting. And we're currently going through all these changes. And I've actually worked with the Asian Chamber a little bit, so I get to see some of the insides of what's going on and all the street changes. So it's amazing. I feel like we're a little bit late on that, but better late than never.
Never too late, because that's worlds ahead of a lot of other places. So I mean, we all just have to kind of keep pushing forward and making us visible. I think that's a big part of it. And now I want to actually jump, and this is I love talking about AAPI history, but I'm sure our listeners are like, hello, you're talking to the best cosplayers in the world here, let's ask some more questions. But Yaya, I'd like for you to actually share a little bit about your book right now, because I was on your website. It looks amazing, and everyone actually goes to your site and your YouTubes and all of that to learn from you anyway. So talk to us about the book.
Oh, yes. So, yes, I wrote a book. I wrote a book about cosplay and my story, my history and how I kind of got into cosplay. And it's very purple, and the cover is very, very purple, but it's called Yaya Han's World of Cosplay. That was actually not my choice. That was the publisher's choice. But yeah, this book, I wanted to spend 2020 going around doing book tours and talking to people about the book, and really this was the culmination of my cosplay experience. After 20 years of cosplaying, I was like, I'm coming out with a book. And then the pandemic hit. And so I spent, over half of a year in 2019 writing it. And then it came out during the pandemic. I had to like do all my whatever promotions
Virtual.
online and, do like book readings on the Facebook Live and such. And so it was definitely kind of disappointing to not be able to, immediately talk to people about it. But I have received tons of great support and, and also talking on Cos Talk Live, Jinx's, I guess you is it also a podcast or would you call it a live?
Just a stream
talk
show?
Yeah,
Live
talk show. Yes,
yeah.
Cos Talk Live, and just being able to still like know that the community is there. And then this past weekend, I did my first convention since the pandemic, a small convention in North Carolina. I got to do a panel on the book and talk to people about the book, and I was like, this is what I want. I just wanted to talk to people that have read the book and, what they thought of it. And so, I hope that I'll be able to do more of that. Like if I can go to more events and do more panels and just, get more people to pick it up. Cause I think it's surprising to people to find out that this is a book about the culture of cosplay and not how to make costumes, because there are tons of books on crafting and sort of like the ins and outs of sewing and armor making and such. But I really wanted to write a book about where cosplay came from and what makes us tick, what is so unique about this community, and also what are some of the pitfalls in it. So like I have a whole section about negativity in cosplay, sexism in cosplay, racism and such, but also lots of musings about like how people enjoy it and why it's worth cosplaying, even despite some of the unpleasant aspects, like why it is so worth it to devote so much time and effort and passion into it. So yes, I hope people can pick it up. And
yes, I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to read it, and then hopefully you'll come back and we can really talk about it.
Yeah, anytime.
I can vouch. I read it. Our whole show read it when we brought Yaya on.
Yes,
we were super excited, and it was great. It like she said, it's different. There's not any other really books like that out there, and I feel like cosplay is starting to like steamroll. A lot of people are trying to get into it now. And I feel like this is going to be the beginning of something that's going to last forever. There's like courses in community college. I don't know if anybody knew that. Someone's like, I took Cosplay 101. I'm like, you mean like a panel? They're like, no, at the community college. I'm like, whoa, like mind blown. I could just see Yaya's book on like one of the required textbooks.
It's in the syllabus. It's in the syllabus. Definitely. I think so. For sure.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
That would be great. Yeah.
It's probably going to happen because, I mean, it's also such an important thing to have someone that's really been in the community, but also who started from scratch. Like you literally worked from the ground up to kind of be where you're at now. And it definitely has not been easy, right? Like that journey must have been a lot of hard work. What would you say, Yaya? It was like the most kind of that challenging. What was the most challenging thing for you? Because obviously you got your start on your own, and right now everybody sees you as, one of the most famous cosplayers in the world. Oh, she probably has sponsors. She has it easy, or, like people think it's easy, and it's so not easy. And I can see I have no artistic talent in terms of crafting, but I do, I direct film, I direct choreography, and I understand art in that regard. And I could see so much detail in both of your cosplays, but so much detail. And I can't even imagine the amount of work that goes into just one piece. So, maybe you can talk a little bit about that kind of challenge, and then
for me, the challenge has always been to be to be resilient and to, endure. Like, I feel like the crafting aspect is challenging in itself, but that's the fun part to me. That's the inspiration and the reason I'm still cosplaying after all these years. I'm always excited to take on creative challenges and to keep learning and honing and such. But what is challenging, what is really, really difficult for cosplayers like throughout the years is just to be to find their place in this community and to to evolve with it. I think like people get really tired because cosplay, like it changes very fast, but it took a very long time for it to be taken serious. And so for the past 15 years or so, it was like, how do we make people see that, what we do is valid and that this is a art form. This is not just a hobby. And this is not just like Halloween dress up. And I think me sort of deciding to make a career out of cosplay before it was possible to have a career, like before it was an industry. I quit my job in 2005. So, and try to make cosplay my full-time job. So that was like about, 8 years too early. But, I was resilient during that time. Like I endured. So it's like if many conventions that I went to in those early years, even though they would list me as a guest, I would get nothing. I would get a badge, or I would have to share a hotel room with staffers or another cosplayer, or they would just give me a booth. And but because I ended up just negotiating for booths. I was like, give me a booth space so I can sell stuff. And so I made my own merchandise. I brought my own merchandise to the events. And then I made that into a source of income, like if I have the ability to go to 15 conventions, 20 conventions a year, even if they don't pay me, I'll make my own money at the booths. And, eventually I was able to negotiate more and more for myself over like 10 years. I was like, after 10 years, I was able to negotiate for all expenses paid as well as like appearance fee and such. But all that took so much time. And that's what nobody really understands, that part was really tough, to always feel like you're not really a part of the industry. You're not really important because you came from a fan community. Like I was not in the industry. I was not an artist or producer or voice actor or somebody who made these canon like series and movies and comics happen. Like I was just a fan. And until finally cosplay became its own value. So it was like, I am a cosplay artist. Finally. So
not just someone who prances around in costumes.
Yeah, that was definitely very, I think, challenging is to just like stay in this community and not make too many concessions for myself. Like I still, for the most part, do what I love to do. And I think a lot of people now get into cosplay as a stepping stone to whatever other careers. So they approach cosplay very differently, where they're very strategized and they might be doing something that they know they're not going to want to do the rest of their lives, but they're like, I'm willing to do this for the next 5 years so that it builds me up so I can continue and do something else. For me, I've always kept as the foundation my passion for crafting and making and for sort of like the transformation aspect. And so I'm very grateful to have been able to, maintain and achieve what I have without like compromising my own like passion too much. So, but it's been a long, tough journey.
I know. And that's the thing. It's people see the end result. And they don't realize how much strife and how many challenges you've overcome. And Jinx, what would you say is like kind of the most challenging part for you? Because I know that you're super creative and I've seen a lot of your costumes and things as well. And this is your passion as well.
Yeah. I think one of the, like Yaya mentions, like resilience. It's so easy to get discouraged and unmotivated in this hobby. It's a lot easier these days to get started. And of course, we see a lot of pre-made costumes now, and there's a lot of different reasons why people cosplay, which is cool because, it's just becoming more accessible. But the last 15, 20 years, if you started early and you didn't make it, it was really tough. If you stopped the hobby because of whatever reason, it wasn't easy. I used to keep it under wraps a lot. I didn't tell people I was a cosplayer until maybe like the 2010s. And, you know, a couple years ago, my therapist is like, you cosplay? And I'm like, how do you know what that is? And nowadays I get a lot of event planners reaching out to me locally. I've actually helped coordinate some cosplay events and contests, even at places where you wouldn't expect cosplay to be. So this is where I'm thinking that people are starting to realize how valuable cosplayers are. It's such a multifaceted hobby. And I mean, it tracks so many different skill levels and so many different types of people now. It encompasses all sorts of genres and fandoms. That obviously now that's why manufacturers have seen how good it is and they're starting to make money off of it. You know, you can go to craft store and there's like a cosplay aisle now. And that's cool because we used to have to think out of the box of, okay, well, let me use this yoga mat to, you know, make whatever. And now there's all sorts of different densities of cosplay foam, different companies making foam. Like, of course, Cosplay Fabrics with Yaya makes foam. And there's like 7 or 8 other companies at least that provide cosplay specific foam. So the fact that like we've made it this long and have seen all these changes, you know, it makes me feel good that I was able to stay motivated, but it also depends on why you're cosplaying. I hear people say, oh, I don't like it anymore because people say this and that about me. And it's really important to know what is important to you. Like if you're cosplaying for other people to approve of you, it's not going to go down well. You know, if you cosplay because you like the craft, you like to create stuff, or you like to perform, or you just like to see people smile when they see their favorite character in person, as long as that's whatever it is that brings you joy, I think you can succeed and continue on. If it's anything that's, you know, more superficial, it's not going to last. You might have, you know, short success, but in the end, it really depends on your happiness and how happy you are. It's a hobby. It's something that you're supposed to enjoy. So when you stop enjoying it, I think that's when a lot of people start to feel unmotivated.
Yeah. And earlier you had mentioned, Yaya, that, you know, you finally went to your first convention and hopefully the book tour is going to also kind of go hand in hand with that. I'm super curious because I know conventions are such a huge part of not just for the book tour, but of your cosplay business and what you do. And it's been just an insane year. Does that mean you crafted like 1,000 extra costumes because you were home and you weren't traveling, or, you know, and you'd already finished your book. So it would be different if you were like, oh, I'm on quarantine, let me write now. I mean, what did you do during that time? How did it affect you? And, you know, looking at you both, everybody looks healthy. And I hope that's the case for you and your family and your loved ones. But like, how did the pandemic really affect kind of your lives?
It turned my life upside down completely. Yeah, it's been very, very rough for me and my small business because we really did depend on conventions. You know, I went to 25 conventions, I think in 20, like the last several years, it was like average 25 conventions a year. And all of our products, everything that I did work-wise, it was all surrounding appearances and being there in person. And so when we lost that immediately, you know, like it was like tough for my book, but really, really tough for my small business and figuring out how to keep my employees and how to keep like the lights on at our warehouse and such. So we like pivoted towards making face masks in April 2020. And so we did that for the majority of 2020, was just make face masks and hunt for cotton and hunt for elastic all over the world. It was because the great
supplies were
hunt.
low, right? Yeah.
Yes, it really was the great cotton hunt. I did everything that I could. Oh my gosh. It was like I started just blindly ordering fabric because by the time you place the order, you're not sure if it's there anymore. So half the time I would buy fabric that they would then cancel the order or cancel the majority of the order and just be like, sorry, it's out of stock. We just couldn't keep up with, you know, the stock level. And but yeah, so that was 2020. And I was very affected by the world news, and I definitely experienced a lot of trauma with like how just like all the negative things happening in the world and the election and everything. And so I try to be fairly productive, but like for months I just made face masks instead of costumes, and it wasn't until the beginning of 2021 that I really found my creativity again, and that was actually through building photo sets. Like I have a warehouse that just like wasn't being used, very much because we were all working from home. We were like actively avoiding each other and coming in, on separate days. So we would not be in the same space with each other. And I was like, I have this whole area that we're not using, for anything. So like, we can't go anywhere to do photo shoots. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to build a set. I'm just going to like get a backdrop and put some furniture in here, like buy some cheap furniture on Facebook Marketplace. It's fine if it like is falling apart because I just needed to look all right in the photo. And that brought my creativity back immediately. Like it made me want to make costumes. It made me have all these visions for new photo shoots, and made me learn more about lighting and photography. And I'm like dragging my husband to my photographer, being like, "You're gonna learn studio lighting now. We're gonna do this." And so it was very unexpected, but I'm still on that kick, and I'm like, I just like discovering new ways to stay inspired. So I've made more costumes this year, and also I've done some social media campaigns with video game companies and different like media outlets where I'm just like making a costume and then promoting a thing. And that's been also like good as supplemental income, since masks started to drop off in sales this year, which is totally understandable,
but unfortunate.
yeah, but like it's all right. Like I knew we wouldn't be able to just like change our business to just making face masks.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So I'm grateful, but
I'm also glad your creativity kind of returned, because this has been such a horrible year for so many people, and they've been in that quote unquote rut, and especially something where creativity is, you can't force it, right? You can't make yourself be creative. And so I was going to ask Jinx the same thing. Like, is it kind of like writing when you get writer's block? Like, do you have creativity block? Like, what do you do, Jinx, to kind of get yourself out of that?
What's so funny is that like I had a different response than Yaya, of course, because, I it wasn't my full-time job. It was more of a hobby, where I was like, okay, well, I don't have an event and I've got plenty of time. I actually started on a project that I never thought I would start, that I didn't think I could do. And the fact that I didn't have a deadline was so calming that I would just, every day I would just, a couple hours just hand sew, or I was doing a Zoom meeting, I would hand sew. It was completely different for me, and it really helped my mental health. And it always has, like, cosplay's always been a big part of like self-care and mental health, but it was just, it was so instrumental during the pandemic. And I know it was for a lot of people. But I mean, the main issue is that cosplay is a social hobby. I mean, it was a lot more than the pandemic. It was more of a social hobby, going to the events, seeing people's, definitely before social media, of course. It was like only a social. If you didn't wear it in public, you didn't cosplay, right? Pixar didn't happen. So when the pandemic happened and everything shut down, that's when TikTok started really, blowing up for cosplayers. And that's kind of where Cost Talk Live came out of. So at the height of the pandemic, I was myself and 3 other friends, some other co-hosts on Cost Talk Live. We were meeting regularly, choreographing a skit for WonderCon. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, nobody go anywhere. And we were like, wow, we were just seeing everybody, we were seeing each other like every week. And so finally I'm just like, let's just do a show. I don't know. It doesn't matter if anybody watches it. Like, let's just talk. And that's how it started. And we get people all over the place that are like, oh, I was dying for cosplay content. I watch your show and blah, blah, blah. And I want to be on it. And it's been really fun. It's a great way to connect with a lot of different people. We actually streamed with Anime Next, which is in New Jersey. They did a whole online showcase, and we did a 4-hour stream with them.
Wow.
And we had such great feedback from them. So it's opened a lot of great opportunities. I've reached out to other small companies that maybe have started up during the pandemic or were struggling. Like, hey, let's get together and partner up. I've got a partnership with a local company that does a selfie museum that really want to get into the cosplay community. So it's really been a great direction. Of course, we've had Yaya on a couple times and helped her with her book and showcased her great fabric. So good. And it's just a lot of fun because we all miss that interaction with other cosplayers. Yeah. Of course, it's become a lot more of an online hobby. There's more reels, TikToks, all sorts of things that we can do now online. I think there's going to be that in-person phenomenon that's never going to go away. Like that feeling of being with other cosplayers in person is always going to be something that cannot be replaced with, the internet or robots.
Yeah. I think it's like so impressive that you guys have kept up with the live show just about every weekend, every Sunday. I'm so amazed that you have been so consistent with it and have all these really like insightful topics every time. And also it's really impressive that you came back from, a hiatus in cosplay and are just doing it like so vigorously now. And so I think that's very rare.
Yeah, definitely. Because I had taken a couple of years off and something in me just sparked. And from then on, I've just been running at full steam. But yeah, one of my favorite things to do in cosplay is just help people cosplay. I've turned a lot of, normal people into cosplayers. I'm very proud of that.
All right. I'm going to take you up on that. Everyone always asks, why do you cosplay? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
You're going to do Mulan. Hello.
I need help though. I need help.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was the thing.
Yeah.
I would go to these panels and they're like, are you going to cosplay Mulan? I'm like, I'm just going to disappoint everyone. I can't do that. So at San Diego,
you're not going to disappoint anyone. Nope.
At San Diego Comic-Con, I did the comfy. Is it comfy or casual? I can't remember. Casual Mulan. So that I
From
could
Wreck-It
pull
Ralph.
off. Yes, because that's like jeans and Converse and the jacket. So,
but I did that same outfit.
I didn't make any of it though. It
doesn't matter. I didn't make it either. It was like, that's totally fine. I think.
Oh my gosh, maybe you should be twinning Mulans.
Yes. No, she was so cool in that.
You could do the different versions of Mulan.
Yes, we could all do the different versions. So that would be a lot of fun. But I don't want to take up too much more of your time because we're already coming on the hour, and hopefully you both agree to come back and talk to me more. I have so much more I want to talk about. But my final question was more like, cosplay is a hobby for a lot of people and that's their kind of time away. And I know, Jinx, it is kind of for you, but what do you do in your downtime, or is cosplay still part of your downtime routine?
I love video. I still play video games.
Which ones are you playing now?
Overwatch. I play Overwatch almost every night.
Okay.
And Final Fantasy VII Remake. I've always been a Final Fantasy fan. I have a Final Fantasy VIII tattoo, and I got that when I was 28. So people are like, "Are you going to still game when you're so and so age?" I'm like, "Well, I'm 37, so I'm still gaming." So, you know.
Hey,
it is
you
weird
enjoy it, and it's a release, and you game with other people. So
yes,
cool.
Absolutely.
How about you?
So I have been finding my Chinese roots again. I started watching Chinese dramas. Started just because I wanted to just have some practice with comprehension and just getting used to more just listening to Mandarin. And it's become an obsession. I have 3 different Hanfu outfits that I want to make.
Wow.
I'm planning a trip to St. Louis just to go to the botanical garden because they have a Chinese garden. It's the closest Chinese garden to me. There are only 5 in this country. The biggest one is in Oregon, but I'm I have a contact to the St. Louis one, so I'm going to go there and do a photo shoot. I'm making,
we used to have one here and it closed down.
Yeah. It's hard to find. I'm I've been collecting Chinese furniture. I'm going to build a study, a set and do all my my wuxia. I bought a sword.
I love it.
Yeah. So I and it's really great because it's helping me. I'm starting to like think in Chinese sometimes. And
Okay.
it's really
we can
like
practice
very
off air because I'd be
nostalgic.
embarrassed, but off air we can practice our 中文。
好，非常好。
非常好，对。
So
I was going to tell you
I'm
should
really
come
into it.
to the Walam Temple in Orlando because we have a very like traditional Chinese temple that's pretty. It's
Let's
the first
go.
one in
I'm
it's the
there.
first one in the US. It's very different, and
wow.
everyone always asks to film there, and we always say no.
Oh, okay. Can I come? I'm coming in
Orlando
December.
is not far.
No, I'm coming to Orlando in December.
Oh,
Wow.
done.
Yeah.
Let's do
Okay.
it.
I'll bring
That's
like
exciting.
my kung fu
Okay.
outfit. You can
I will teach
show me
you.
the right poses.
I will show you. That was one of my panels at San Diego Comic-Con was cosplayers ready your swords. And it was for cosplayers to help them be more authentic with their weaponry.
Oh my
And
god.
Wow.
That was
We'll do
my
a
panel.
thing with it.
I
Let's
need to do
a
that
thing
too.
with it.
Yes.
Like we'll stream it or something.
Yes,
Like,
yes, we should.
make it
We
into
should.
a thing.
But I'll need a costume and I'll need help.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
Oh
so
my
fun
gosh.
because I actually went to a martial artist when I was Chun-Li and I'm like, please show me the right
Yes.
moves. I do not want to be gatekeeped. So he showed me all the different, and he's like, fix my form, please.
Yes. So that's why I did the casual Mulan because I was like, all right, I got to show up in cosplay for this thing
Yes.
because it's a cosplayer panel. And but it was so much fun. And I had my martial arts team come and they did martial arts fighting in their cosplay outfits, and it was a lot of fun. So it was a good time. But yes, we are going to work together. This is going to be
That's so fun.
the wheels are turning. So, ladies, thank you so much. This is so much fun. And listeners, you got a real treat today because you got two incredible cosplayers for the one podcast. So Yaya Han and Jinx, everybody. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yay.
Take care.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.